Now, as I'm sure you're probably going to read or hear on many end-of-year lists, 2020 has definitely been a year to forget. There's not a great deal of highlights that have come from this year. You have to really dig deep to find them, but there are some real lowlights, and some of them you don't really have to dig very far at all to find. Take WWE, for example. At a time during a global pandemic when the world was literally on fire pretty much everywhere, they decided to let go of a bunch of their performers to save themselves financially, apparently, because their bottom line was in such a bad state, it wasn't that they needed to make the changes. It didn't. So while in truth none of us enjoy that these lists have to even exist, I certainly don't enjoy doing them, let's just think of it this way. If we get through this, then maybe, just maybe, this awful, god-awful year 2020 will be over. Not to say that the calendar year will suddenly fix everything and 2021 will be fine, but god damn it can't be much worse than what's going on right now, can it? The first of a few mutually agreed releases at the start of the year. Jazzy Gabert had been with WWE for 6 months working over in NXT and hadn't really made any headway. She was advised by the company that the main roster simply wasn't interested in what she would have to offer and decided not to renew her deal after it came up. Despite performing really well during a number of high-profile matches during her time with WWE, she faced Meiko Satomura in the Mae Young Classic 2018. She also faced Dakota Kai on NXT UK. Killer Kelly was released from the company in January, and to be honest, feels like a missed opportunity with her. She's really good, as is proved by the fact she was last featured on Impact Wrestling in the Knockouts Tag Team Tournament. Matt Hardy elected not to renew his deal with WWE after his recent stint due to the creative differences he had with the company. Doesn't that sound rather familiar? However, he landed on his feet because he left WWE and immediately walked into AEW. After first requesting their releases back in January 2019 due to a mountain of disagreements and creative differences they had with WWE, the Revival were finally granted their wish in April 2020, just days before the infamous Black Friday that happened this year, where lots of wrestlers lost their jobs. The Revival, I think it's fair to say, have also landed on their feet, much like Matt Hardy, because the Revival are one of the best goddamn tag teams in the world, and as such, they've gone to AEW, have been the tag team champions, and continue to be great. What a shocker. Kurt Hawkins' second stint with the company was ended on April 15th, 2020 as part of the Black Friday releases, and to be fair, Kurt Hawkins did a brilliant job with what he was given and what he was asked to do. He knew his position in the company, and still, apparently, that wasn't good enough. EC3, a man who seemed moulded in the image of everything Vince McMahon would want, was apparently still not welcome during his second stint with the company. He didn't even wrestle in 2020 for WWE due to a concussion issue that he'd had, and his last match for the company was back in October 2019. To say this was disappointing and completely underwhelming altogether, not his fault, would be an understatement. NXT trainee HUSSAIN ALDAGAL was released from his contract as part of the Black Friday releases, and to be honest, he'd only really signed and been working at the Performance Center the prior June. Despite some personal and professional ups and downs within the company, Lio Rush seemed to finally find his feet in WWE as the Cruiserweight Champion in 2019. Unfortunately, however, WWE seemed to see things differently. He was also released during the April 15th cuts. A Mae Young Classic 2018 competitor and regular NXT house show performer, MJ Jenkins was released in April 2020 from WWE. She has since recirculated in AEW, teaming with Kenzie Page in a losing effort to the Nightmare Sisters. Rather shockingly released as part of the April 15th releases, Gallows and Anderson have since left the company and gone to Impact Wrestling, where they've become the tag team champions, because let's face it, again, another tag team with all the upside in the world. They had actually featured for WWE as recently as WrestleMania, where they helped AJ Styles during his Boneyard match against The Undertaker. Having been used so well in NXT as the leader of Sanity, Eric Young went to the main roster, took a kicking from Seth Rollins, and then WWE released him in April for his troubles. Thankfully, he, like many others on this list, has turned up elsewhere in Impact Wrestling and has also been the champion there, which, again, shows how talented these guys and gals are who are being released. Rocky struggled to find any TV time in NXT or in WWE in general over the 4 years that he was with the company. He did spend a lot of time though on the NXT Largo loop before being released, like many others, as part of the Black Wednesday cuts. Once thought to be a lifer in WWE due to being the best bad comedy wrestler in a company that is absolutely obsessed with bad comedy wrestling, Heath Slater's name was another one that would unfortunately find itself on the April 15th releases list. He did make a return to the company before his arrival in Impact in July, where he faced Drew McIntyre for the WWE Championship in a squash match real quick. A strange moment, but yeah, I don't know. Strange one with Heath. Do love him, but maybe this is the best thing for him. After being one of the superstars focused on during the WWE Breaking Ground documentary, Tino Sabbatelli looked like he had everything to be that kind of star that WWE would be interested in. He spent 5 years with the company though, a bit of indifference, a bit of injury, and ultimately he would find himself also let go on Black Wednesday. He did turn up in AEW briefly on AEW Dark for a match, however he did allegedly release results and spoilers back to WWE, so since then the relationship with AEW has also soured. Cast your mind back to WrestleMania 34, Aiden English had forced his way onto the card and was a key point alongside Rusev and the Rusev Day stable, and literally people loved this guy, and since then they split the faction up, demoted him to 205 Live, not as a wrestler but actually as a commentator, which he was good at, but he was a better guy in ring, I would imagine, and even that didn't appease WWE. They still released him on Black Wednesday. There were a few surprise names on that April 15th releases list, and Eric Rowan's name was definitely one of them. He'd featured prominently on WWE TV alongside Daniel Bryan. Again, they split up a good thing, set him off on his own, and then gave him this weird spider gimmick. I mean, they didn't exactly give him the tools to succeed, I don't think, and then he was released. Like all the others. I don't know what to say here, because even Eric Rowan on a podcast said he was surprised by this one. Another NXT trainee who had only joined the Performance Center the previous September, Edgar Lopez, would find his name on the list of wrestlers released as well on Black Wednesday. Now, I doubt any of the wrestlers were happy to be released on April 15th, but the Colons have recently said that they were glad to be gone from WWE because, let's face it, they were a case of either very bad gimmicks given to them by creative, or creative has nothing for you. Neither of these work in trying to get wrestlers over, so it's no surprise that they're glad to be gone. Alexander JAKSIC has less than 3 years wrestling experience full stop, never mind in WWE or NXT, and he had been working on house shows doing jobs for the Black and Gold brand, but unfortunately WWE deemed him surplus to requirements in April 2020. There aren't going to be any good releases from the folks who were let go on April 15th, but Sarah Logan's is a particularly bad and spiteful one. They split the Riot Squad up, they sent them on their merry way, she went to main event, worked her arse off to become a better performer as a single star, and then she was let go for her trouble. And then on top of that, WWE reformed the Riot Squad after she'd left. Look, Sarah Logan sounds like she's happy in the place where she is, and fingers crossed all goes well with her upcoming pregnancy, but other than that, you've just got to think, why are this company so spiteful? Why are they that way? This is an act who worked hard to become better. What's the point? After several years on the US independent scene, Nick Ogarelli spent time doing non-televised jobs on NXT house shows before being released on Black Wednesday. Since then, however, he has also shown up on AEW Dark in a number of squash matches over there. Maria Kanellis was reduced to playing a screaming bully to her downtrodden husband Mike, and unfortunately, that is about the highlight that you can give her for her return to WWE. Yes, she did have time out for pregnancies, but honestly, the duo of Maria and Mike Kanellis were actually quite good. They had some chemistry there. They could have done more with them. Mike overcame so many of his own personal controversies to try and become a better performer, and ultimately both of them were released during the Black Wednesday cuts, to no surprises whatsoever. Mohamed FAHIM joined the WWE Performance Center back in January 2018, and unfortunately the only other notable thing that's happened during his time in the company was being released on Black Wednesday. Zack Ryder's 15-year dream job unceremoniously came to an end with WWE on April 15th. The guy lived and breathed this brand. He donated so much of his time and effort to the company, and ultimately they just decided, nah, we're not into you. Still, after all this time, he has since been on AEW television as Matt Cardona. That was only a brief stint. He's currently a free agent at this point. I guess to show you how spiteful WWE are, they then decided to start their own wrestling figures show or something without Matt Cardona or Curt Hawkins, Brian Myers as he is now, because that's who they are. That's WWE for you. Cesar Bononi spent 5 years on the NXT treadmill, where he'd do some jobs on NXT TV and be a regular feature on house shows, but ultimately never really made a big impact where he wanted to. He was let go on April 15th and has since also made some appearances on AEW Dark. One of the crueler releases that happened during the April 15th cuts, No Way Jose was asked to perform on an episode of Monday Night Raw just days before his release. Now normally that would be pretty bad, but on top of the fact there was a global pandemic going on at the time and he was literally putting his life at risk for the company in its time of need, that's how they rewarded him. They got rid of him. great. Now you probably remember Dan Mayer, that is that guy who Samoa Joe beat the living crap out of on an episode of NXT back in 2016. A fake debut for him led to him getting his ass kicked by the Samoan submission machine. He has appeared elsewhere on NXT TV, on NXT UK, and last wrestled a match against Tyler Breeze back in March 2020, but he too was also released on April 15th. I mean, what exactly are you meant to say about this? Rusev literally had everything. He had everything. He had the fans on his side, he had the look, he had the performance, he could do the whole thing. Serious, comedy, he had it all. WWE just didn't want to know. Rusev Day, forget about it. All of that stuff didn't matter to them. For whatever reason, he just wasn't their cup of tea. He has left, of course, has joined AEW as Miro, and of course that allows him to go on Twitch and be great at life in general, so hopefully that'll end up being the better thing for him in the long run. But ultimately, look at this guy, man. How do you mess up Rusev? He basically put it on a plate for them and they just didn't want to know. He was also released on April 15th. Deonna Purrazzo is a performer who got it all. She was on NXT as a jobber there. She was on the main roster as a jobber there against Nia Jax and Asuka. And ultimately, WWE decided that it didn't need her services in April and released her with the rest of them on Black Friday. But she's obviously talented. She went straight into Impact Wrestling, has become their women's champion, and to be honest, surely a huge upside for her has been being able to go away and be recognised as the skilled performer that she actually is. It's a shame it didn't work out for her in WWE, but actually, she might be better off. TINO Conti spent 4 years with WWE. She was released in April 2020 along with everybody else, but she was at the point, you could argue, where she was finally coming into her stride on NXT TV. They'd spent all that time making her better. She was getting better. She'd been better. And then she got let go. I mean, I don't know how it works. I don't know how that works. But anyway, their loss was AEW's gain. She's gone across there, has been paired up with Anna Jay, and to be honest, the upside looks like it's there. Fingers crossed she gets to make the best of it over at AEW. Mars Wang had been working NXT house shows since March 2018, before his release in April 2020. He hadn't actually wrestled though since March 2019, before he got the bad news. Chris Hero, who has of course since retired the KASSIUS OHNO moniker after being released, turned up in WWE for his second stint and honestly made a great go of it down in NXT. He was there as an enhancement talent and made everybody who was against him feel like a star, genuinely. The guy is incredible. He even did the same over in NXT UK. His promo game was tight. Everything seemed good. He seemed to have found a role for himself in WWE, but apparently not. His name was, of course, also one of those released in April 2020. Cain Velasquez brought this incredible UFC pedigree with him over to WWE. He was brought in as a guy who could legitimately face off against Brock Lesnar, having been a man who literally beat him in UFC, and WWE decided instead of letting him wrestle, as he's proven he can do, in Triple R, that they just wanted him to be an MMA guy for Brock to eat, basically. And the match in Crown Jewel, or whatever the pay-per-view was over in Saudi Arabia, was absolutely crap. And then ultimately he would get injured before an appearance that was scheduled at the Royal Rumble, and then let go in April 2020. I mean, this guy could have been a great star for WWE. Isn't that the story for quite a lot of the people on this list? Like many others on this list, Fazal Kurdi was released from his WWE contract during the Black Wednesday releases, having only actually signed with the Performance Center the previous June. Curtis Axel's not-so-perfect 13 years in WWE came to an end in April 2020. He hadn't featured on WWE television in 2 months since a match with Daniel Bryan, and to be honest, it had been patchy in between that. They just never really seemed to have anything for Curtis Axel, despite the fact he did have a great heritage and pedigree. Still, maybe you can find life somewhere else. Well, then again, maybe not. Marcos Gomez was another NXT trainee who hadn't been at the Performance Center very long. He only signed his contract the previous May and was let go in April 2020. Now, the fact that this stuff was happening is certainly not a positive, but it is a positive that the speaking out movement was finally being taken serious and being given a spotlight in 2020. It was brought to the forefront in June, and a lot of people came and spoke out, and a lot of people were investigated both in WWE and a bunch of other companies across the wrestling industry. And some companies actually did something about it. Not all the companies, and certainly not all the wrestlers who were named in the speaking out allegations, but Jack Gallagher, Ligero, and Travis Banks were all named in the speaking out allegations and were released from WWE following internal investigations in June. Former NXT Women's Champion, Women's Tag Team Champion, all-round good egg, and captain of the Joy in My Heart for quite some time, Kairi Sane mutually agreed to leave WWE in July of this year. She decided to go back to Japan so she could be with her husband. That sounds pretty great to me, but overall she decided she would be an ambassador for the company over in Japan. And to be honest, given the fact that on the main roster she got absolutely brutalised, not in kayfabe, by Nia Jax in multiple matches. I'd say she's probably better off. Kyrie, we miss you dearly, but thank God you're not having to go through that anymore. An absolute powerhouse of a tag team down in NXT as the tag team champions down there. They moved up to the main roster, immediately lost Paul Ellering, which was a huge question mark at the time, and it would prove to be a correct one because they never really got going on the main roster. Yes, they did become the Raw Tag Team Champions at one point. They had a little stint working with Seth Rollins, but ultimately, this is a tag team that could have just powerhoused their way through everybody and been treated as such. They didn't get that. They became almost a comedy act at points. And then, because of injuries to both performers, they were both eventually released in September from the company. And finally, Zelina Vega, whose employment situation became the story rather than the release itself in November 2020 when the company decided to let her go. Publicly backing unionization when WWE decided to start claiming money from wrestlers who were making money through third parties, Zelina Vega decided enough was enough. She was drawing the line here, she decided to back herself, and she fell on her own sword. The company released her due to the fact she refused to sort of terminate her Twitch account and stop doing her outside WWE activities. And Zelina Vega became a free agent who is definitely going to get snapped up by AEW or anybody who's got half a brain. She's too damn good. I hope this works out for her, and genuinely, I hope she reaches a point where WWE can look back. You know what it is? I was going to say where they look back and realise they've made a huge mistake, but that's not WWE. They're never going to learn. Zelina Vega, you have my respect. I hope it all works out for you elsewhere because you deserve it. You're the goddamn best, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. So there you have it then. 43 wrestlers released by WWE this year. Yes, I know, it's not an enjoyable topic to talk about in any way, shape or form, but here we are. We made it through the list, and now that hopefully means that that's one list, end of year list, at least closer to this god-awful year being finished. But if we did indeed miss any out, please do let us know in the comments down below. Let me know what you think about some of the names on here, because god damn it, the amount of talent that is on that list you could start your own company with. Genuinely, there's that many good names on there. Don't forget to like and share, hit the old subscribe button if you haven't already. It's free. You can find the original article for this piece if you really want to go through this again at whatculture.com/WWE. You can also follow What Culture on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. You can follow me on Twitter if indeed that is your thing at It's Adam Nicholas, or maybe you just want some more videos to distract yourself from this absolute garbage fire of a year, which should be at the end of this one. Hope you have a good rest of 2020, I guess, whatever's left, and fingers crossed next year's a bit better. Anyway, I've been Adam Nicholas, this has been What Culture, and I'll see you next time.